Tretower Court is a stunning surviving example of a 15th century home for a person of substance. Not quite earning the status of a full-blown castle, although it can boast impressive defences and a rather captivating garden feature. This medieval building stands to be one of the best preserved of its kind accessible to the public. Incredibly, despite centuries of continuous use as a functioning home, the majority of the structure remains untouched and still holds its original 14th century layout. The main changes are a Tudor porch inside the inner court and the installation of 17th century windows, chimneys and fireplaces. So, what exactly does a typical upper-class medieval home feature, and how did the medieval upper class live? Far removed from the cold, damp, stone structures we see all the time in films and TV, the truth of medieval homes is something quite glorious. Today, we uncover the hidden secrets of an upper-class medieval home as we explore the spectacular relic that is Tretower Court. But first, a quick history lesson. We begin not with the court itself, but we turn to the ruins on Tretower's estate. This is Tretower Castle. Tretower Castle was built in the 11th century by the Picards, a wealthy Norman family. It began life as a typical motte bailey, with timber walls encircling a shallow mound, and a timber residence on top. In the middle of the 12th century, the castle underwent a significant upgrade, with the timber defences on the mound being switched out for stone. The residential areas atop the mound were also upgraded to stone, rearranged into a shell keep, which was a popular blueprint for castle making at the time. Furthermore, the castle design was overhauled once more in the early 13th century, when the buildings inside the shell keep were demolished to make room for a tall 4-storey tower, complete with hoardings, giant fireplaces, and private accommodations accessible by a roofed bridge. The outer bailey walls were also upgraded to stone during this time, connected by 2 circular towers. It was the main tower that awarded the name Tretower, meaning the place of the tower, as this monolithic stone structure would have been seen for miles around, a footnote of dominance in the valley. The 9 feet thick walls that made up the keep tower were not solely for defence, but were a visible sign of social climbing in the making. The impressive stone structure would have been very expensive and taken many years of workmanship to complete, which, in turn, would have demanded respect from everyone who saw it, with the public noting that an important person lived here. An unwritten rule at the time was the larger the castle, the more important the person. Although, as grand as the home was, and as beautifully ornate the rooms would have been, the circular rooms in a classic 13th century shell keep did not lend themselves to being particularly spacious, usually because of the limited space due to being built on the much earlier Norman earthworks, which were constructed with a smaller dwelling in mind. Some lords, dukes and earls would have added on to their existing castles, knocking through walls or building upwards. The people responsible for the construction of Tretower Court, however, had different plans in mind. Much like today, the medieval period was all about adapting to the latest trends in fashion, whether it be clothing, weaponry, food, or buildings. Never has this been more true than in the 14th and 15th centuries. As trade and exploration extended all throughout the known world, new materials and ways of doing things influenced the ideas and values of England's classes. Large residential homes built around square centre courtyards were becoming all the rage in Spain and other areas in mainland Europe, and the English gentry soon found themselves wanting this new way of living. Small circular greeting rooms and bedrooms would have been replaced with large rectangular halls partitioned into square living quarters. Long rectangular dining tables with parallel kitchens and larders meant that busy servants would no longer need to climb tight spiral staircases to bring their masters food. And fanciful courtyards making the centerpiece of homes would make for a beautiful view from any internal window, both for residents and guests alike. And so, without further ado, let's explore the incredible Tretower Court. Built in around 1300 AD, Tretower Court stands to be one of the best preserved early medieval courts in existence. The building was not solely made with defence in mind. The castle, albeit old and out of date by now, would have still been a more than adequate stronghold to stay in at times of tension. Instead, Tretower Court stands to be one of the earliest surviving examples of 14th century residential homes for the upper class, and, although most of the timbers have been replaced to ensure the structure is secure, the layout still remains largely untouched. The majority of the structure was made from wood, with stone lower and outer walls. The court may have started off life with just the north range, with the west range built later, the stone wall and gatehouse becoming a later 15th century feature. Remarkably, the north range still possesses its early 14th century design. Many doors, turrets, latrines, windows and fireplaces also date back to the early 1300s. In 1404, Tretower witnessed its first recorded military ordeal. It watched over as Sir James Berkeley successfully held off the Welsh attack directed at the castle. Luckily, the court remained relatively damage-free throughout this siege. Only 10 years later, longbowmen, possibly from the same Welsh army, gathered in the courtyard of Tretower, before heading off to France, under the rule of King Henry V's English army during what would be the 100 Years' War. Later on in the 15th century, under the ownership of Sir Roger Vaughan, Tretower Court underwent a large renovation. Sir Roger Vaughan was one of the most richest and powerful men in all of Wales, and his name demanded respect as he was the son of Sir Richard Vaughan, a knight who died at Agincourt in 1415. Roger set to work revamping the North Range, adding a second floor on top of the first floor hall, making the North Range a two-storey building with kitchens and storerooms now situated on the ground floor. He then set to work extending his home, with the construction of the West Range built perpendicular to the existing North Range. This West Range immediately doubled the living space available, adding new sleeping chambers known as solas, as well as a grand dining room for Vaughan's many rich guests. The roofed timber wall walk was also installed around this time to give residents more privacy when going from room to room. Roger's parents were loyal Lancastrians, with both Roger and his father fighting alongside Henry V at the Battle of Agincourt. As the War of the Roses broke out, Roger remained a devout Lancastrian. However, he later switched sides and became loyal to the Yorkists, along with his brothers Watkin and Thomas. By March the 23rd, 1465, Roger became knighted for his activities supporting the Yorkist faction, and was given special responsibilities and treatments for his service. Roger's demise came in 1471, when he was given the task to capture Jasper Tudor, the uncle of Henry Tudor, who would later become King Henry VII. Sir Roger Vaughan chased Tudor following the aftermath of the Battle of Tewkesbury, but Jasper Tudor had set a trap for Vaughan. He was subsequently captured, taken to Chepstow Castle, and beheaded for his actions. Tretower Court, now tarnished in name due to the change of allegiance of its previous owner, now changed hands to Vaughan's son, Sir Thomas Vaughan. Possibly fearing violent retaliation, Thomas built a stone wall on the east and south end during the latter quarter of the 15th century, thus enclosing the building with a central square courtyard. These additional stone defences were armed to the teeth with arrow slits, wall walks, matriculations, and a 3-storey gatehouse. Looped merlons were also added in the walls to cater for gunpowder hand cannons and early muskets. One of the final medieval features was the addition of a grand Tudoresque bay window on the inner wall of the West Range, as well as a porch just south of the bay window. Tretower Court remained in the hands of the Vaughan family for 2 more centuries, until it was sold in 1783 as the Vaughans moved out to take up occupancy in another one of their properties. Unfortunately, this proved to be the decline of the impressive medieval building. Tretower changed hands multiple times and was slowly becoming more and more dilapidated, becoming used as a farmstead, barns, storerooms, and even as a piggery. No proper works were carried out of the property in order to maintain it, and slowly became a forgotten treasure right up until the 19th century, where it was saved and restored. Cadw now owns Tretower, and it is open to the public. What makes Tretower Court particularly fascinating is the fact that it largely escaped damages from the Welsh Border Wars, the War of the Roses, the English Civil War, or simply demolished to make way for a more modern equivalent. This survival gives us a key insight into how the medieval gentry lived and how they made a house a home. One of the best examples of this is in the dining room of the West Range. Although largely reconstructed in the 20th century, staying as close to historical examples as possible, the tall timbered roof, the beautiful bright paintwork, and the plethora of crockery and cutlery shows us that medieval living was not dark, cold, or bleak. People from the Middle Ages enjoyed bright colours, warmth, and quality of life just as much as we do today, and a large percentage of their income would be devoted to it. We also see this in the 19th century Gothic revival Castle Koch. The dining room features awe-inspiring artwork and faux stonework. As we explore the second floor hall in the North Range, we see evidence of white plaster on the walls. These walls would have also been painted fanciful colours, with murals and frescoes depicting important scenes from medieval life, perhaps paying homage to the family's ancestry, just like this 21st century example depicting important scenes from the life of Sir Richard Vaughan. These halls would have been decked out with beautiful timber furniture such as tables, chairs and chests, also painted bright colours and patterns. Even the timber rafters would have been painted. Giant stone fireplaces would illuminate the rooms, keeping them warm and toasty during the winter months, as well as providing a centrepiece for the lords and ladies to gather round for a late night conversation or debate. Depending on the size of the hall, upper floor stands would cater for musicians to play joyful music to keep banquets full of noise and song, as we see here in nearby Caerphilly Castle. Medieval dwellings would also include private herb gardens, vegetable plots, and orchards, as well as flower gardens and open spaces for farm animals. The more wealthy the owner, the larger the garden. Some residences would even have their own private fish ponds. The vegetables, fruits, herbs, livestock and fish would then be cared for by the servants, who would harvest the food and store them in the larders. As methods of storing food for a long time was rather difficult during the medieval period, this meant that breakfast, lunch and dinner was made up of all fresh ingredients, providing a well-balanced and healthy diet. The strong smells from the stews, roasts, and baked goods would fill every room in the building. A wonderful scent indeed, especially when coupled with the warm, glowing fireplaces which were in every room. And when no food was being prepared, sweet-smelling flowers and herbs would be situated in each room to ensure a pleasant odour. Now, of course, the tough times would certainly still be tougher, with no guarantee of a fruitful harvest, cold snaps or storms caused by bad weather proving more damaging than in today's world. But these were simply rarities that the people of medieval England sometimes had to prepare for in advance, perhaps by keeping a hefty stock of firewood, or planning which foodstuffs to grow at certain times of the year to ensure a plentiful harvest. And of course, life was harder for the poor rather than the upper classes. However, the scenes of mud-stained peasants in rags living in cold skeletons of houses is a cruel fantasy of Hollywood. True medieval life would revolve around ensuring the best quality of living for yourself and your family, through brightly coloured walls, roaring fires for warmth, and growing your own vegetables and livestock for free food. Almost every household in the Middle Ages, no matter how rich or poor, would have had their own plot of land to grow whatever they needed. I say goodbye to the Hollywood tropes, and I call for a better understanding and connection to the lives of medieval people. People who were just like you and I, devoted to enjoying the comforts and benefits that life had to offer. And until next time, thanks for watching.